First of all, I'd like to comment on John's perception of a hot fence. When it sparks and you can see it, that's about 7,000 volts if you need the information on that. But I'm Chuck Talbott. I'd like to thank SARE for their support. I've had 2 research and education grants when I was at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro, and I've received 2 farmer-grower grants with my program, agroforestry and integrated systems with pigs on my farm in Mason County, West Virginia, Arbuckle District. And while I was at A&T, I was hired as the head of the small-scale hog producer project. And, you know, in North Carolina, everything was get big or get out, commodity pork. And I was just a little oddity, you know, and the other white meat was very real at that time. And I just didn't know how to move small-scale farmers ahead. If you make $5 net profit on 100 pigs, you're not going to stay in business long. But if you make it on 10,000 hogs that come out of the Smithfield and Murphy and Tyson operations, that's a net profit that holds. All right, first of all, this will be fairly abbreviated. I want to talk about meat quality because that's what's going to make you stand out from Smithfield and Murphy's and everyone else. A niche market, a high value market like John was talking about. And then I'd like to talk about swine characteristics for pigs outside. This has been a hard winter, and I've had litters born in December this year that did very well. And so that means what kind of maternal ability are you looking at from your sows. Developing a seasonal foraging strategy. I'll say one thing. I'm in West Virginia, as I mentioned, and it's heavy clay, old as, you know, the hills, and that's all clay. So, but if anybody has any better soils in West Virginia, I'm still trying to find them. And producing the pork of the season. This is our 2-year cured pork. It's really, you know, when John said you got to dream, well, we really did dream. And it's really turned out to be something I'm very proud of and is really tasty. And the top there, we were invited to have a taste test with mixing bourbons. That kind of goes with the job, but for Whiskey Magazine. And you can see there's a lot of fat in there, but fat is where the flavor's at. And if you try to do something with some lean growing pigs, the other white meat essentially, you're not gonna get any flavor from the diets, and the diets really can make a difference. Okay, well, like I said, when I was at North Carolina A&T, you know, how do we move our small scale farmers ahead? How do we compete with Smithfield and Murphy's? Well, you don't. You know, particularly in a state that's number 2 in producing hogs, second only to Iowa. You produce the other red meat again. And this article right here, I think this came out in '99, The Lost Taste of Pork, Finding a Place for the Iowa Family Farm. And that was it. The chefs were talking about that this meat is tough, it has no flavor, and it just really said, you know, you need fat. And who do we model after? For one thing, if you don't believe me, look at the beef industry, the Angus. And what are they noted for? Marbling, you know, and that's where the flavor's at. And then move it, you know, you can do this. When we did it, I've sent a lot of tests to Iowa looking at marbling scores, and this is certainly a red meat, but that's not, you go and look at the grocery store and you won't find chops like that. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this. This is all in the program, but it makes it what influences tenderness, age, muscle fibers, but mostly intermuscular fat. Okay, when you chew down on your chops or whatever, you're going to get that burst of flavor and like a broth in your mouth, and it's going to make it much more tender. Juiciness and lipids in the fat. Okay, well, while I was at A&T, a fellow, Peter Kaminsky, called me on the phone and said, would you like to try getting some Ossabaw hogs and putting them in the woods and simulate what the Spanish do on the Dehesu region of Spain, producing the Spanish hams. And he said, you know, these hogs are descendants of the Iberian hog, and I'd like to see what comes out of it. So, and here it is in Spain, and those were the Ossabaw hogs we got. This is when they were first released. They would only give us females because they didn't want us breeding anymore. It was an exclusive agreement from the University of Columbia, Missouri at Columbia. They were doing a study on type 2 diabetes because pigs have a thrifty gene. When there's a lot of food, they put on fat, much like humans, and when there isn't, they live off of that fat until the next season. So that's kind of the idea behind that. It's a study for diabetes. Okay, and we were selling ours, basically our hams, at $40 a pound, whereas in Spain, and that was 10 years ago, it's over $100 a pound now. And you can see, you know, the fat that's carrying on these pigs. And personally, I think the fat is so unusual when they come off of the woods in November that I think that the fat is worth more than the meat. You heard it first. Okay, and another thing that's different about it is that when pigs eat a diet high in unsaturated fats, that the fat itself in the pig is unsaturated. So you have to be careful. Not only is it healthy for you, okay, which is a good thing, it's like fish oils, but it'll spoil real quick. And we've lost some meat coming out of the woods, shipping it to New York, and it would come up rancid. So it's like fish. You got about 2 or 3 days before you can freeze it, or before you have to freeze it. Here, you know, the Spaniards are putting it in the lard in the jars and using it as a butter. It's healthier. Okay, that's the Dehesu region where these pigs graze in the woods. This was a typical truck stop. Believe it or not, in Spain, we got a rural development grant to go and see how the system worked. They have a herdsman that follows the pigs around. Look at that fat on there. It's beautiful. And these pigs are about 18 months. They're older, and they weigh about 360 pounds. But here you got a herdsman that's knocking down the acorns. That's that special, that product, that it's worth it to follow these pigs with a herdsman. Okay, that's just some more pictures of the place that we went to. And this is, Brad, you might be interested in this. This is it. I looked in there, and this is how they salt cure the hams. And it changes. It mimics, the curing is 2 years, and it mimics the Mediterranean climate. The humidity changes, the temperatures change, but they put it in a salt pack like this. One day per kilogram, so for 2 pounds, it'd be 1 day, essentially, that it's in this pack. So if you got a 35-pound ham on a 350-pound pig, which is not unusual, it would be in there 17 days, right? Is that right? Yeah, 2. Okay, so and then it changes, and this is in Spanish, and it's mimicking when they pull it out and they water or wash it off, and then it's in for 6 or 9 months at 15 degrees centigrade, and the humidity changes. So, and then this is all done nowadays by climate-controlled areas, and they'll have people on forklifts going up and checking each ham. I don't know how often. So what we needed to do, we got a grant from SARE to look at this, alternative systems with pigs, and but we needed some pigs that had a good foundation, that had good mothering ability and good meat quality. And in that article I showed you earlier, The Lost Taste of Pork, we've got 160 pigs that came to North Carolina that we distributed to predominantly the black farmers. The school I worked at was a historically black school. And then I also use AI, and we've gotten some large black into the herds. But it doesn't matter if it's a red wattle, in my mind. It doesn't matter if it's a Mangalitsa. It doesn't matter. Is it a good pig? Check when you get your pigs hanging up. Does it have good meat characteristics? You want probably, I'd say, depending on what your market is, at least 3/4 of an inch of back fat. And you want some marbling in there, and that's going to require some good genes too. The Berkshire, of course, is noted for good meat quality. The old-time Duroc, and you can still get some of that semen, and they still breed it. You can get that, and I prefer large black as well. So here's, the idea: eating unsaturated fats. This is when we first brought them over. We put them in the woods that year. I had no idea that there would be any mast at all. So we also used peanuts for the pigs, because that's what Smithfield did. They used to turn their pigs out into the peanut fields to glean what was left. And that's what the Smithfield ham really originated from. And we decreased saturated fats. I sent all this meat off to Iowa, and we decreased saturated fats by 28% and increased polyunsaturated fats by 36%. And that's one thing we wanted to know. Could this be a marketing tool? Could it be, for healthy fats? So then I retired from A&T and went back to my farm. There was a book that came out on the Ossabaw hogs, Pig Perfect, and the fellow, I have a rich uncle that was one way to do it too, but somebody that was very interested in importing hams, the Spanish hams, into the U.S. At that time, you couldn't do that. So he says, well, why can't we do what you're doing? So my partner, stood with me all the way, and you don't get paid for these hams until 2 years. By the time that they're bred, it's 3 years before those hams realize any money. Okay, thoughts on producing the pork of the seasons, 350 pounds. If you're going to do that, and the trend is getting bigger, but by golly, you've gone through this. They're almost a year old, 10 to 12 months, these pigs, and you want something there. And like I said, the fat is particularly, I think, is better than the meat. You want a farrow in November and December, so that you're given a year. By the time you put them back into the woods, flavor of the diet is incorporated in the fat. It takes about 6 weeks. If you want to change your diet, and if I tell you one thing that I think would really influence the flavor of your meat, use barley. Get off of corn, soy, and go to barley. Corn got up to $8 a bushel, for one thing. A year or so ago, very expensive, and barley was still 3-something. But when I was at the university, I asked my mentor, I said, if you really wanted to influence the flavor of pork by diet, what would you do? And he said, well, the Europeans say that our corn soy hogs are very bland, and they feed barley. And so I tried that, and boy, I've never looked back. Never looked back. It's just a much deeper flavor, if that's how you would. And like I said, it's going to take 6 weeks if you want to influence the flavor of your pork. Okay, we use A-frames, we've used huts, but the main thing that's going to make this work is good maternal ability, make sure a sow can raise 10 pigs. And we've had real good luck with that Farmers Hybrid Foundation. We've also just 2 years ago, we got a waste management shed. It's like a hoop structure out west where we raise we'll farrow in the barn and then wean the pigs in the barn. And boy, I'll tell you, I mean, it's a mess working in clay and mud, you know, particularly about this time, and it's so much more healthier. So this has made a big difference for our program. There you can see it. That's our house in the background, and this is the new waste management shed. These are our fields that are in barley and rape now. When we talk about cover crops and the emphasis of cover crops, we've had cover crops, and typically long about November, the deer have just nubbed it, you know. And we'll put the cool season barley rape in there, but now it's starting to spring forth. At least I hope by the time I get back. But it's been a cold year. But this is where we use a lot of cover crops. We don't wring their noses. We expect them to work the fields. I'll run a harrow over it and broadcast barley and rape in August, and then we'll put in sorghum Sudan grass that outcompetes anything in terms of weeds. And you got to be careful when you use bedding and you try to get by with cheap hay that's got a lot of weeds in there. Boy, it's a mess. Okay, and here we had some chefs come, and this is the rape. You can see just how beautiful it is. And in the springtime, you got your sows that are farrowing, and they're going out there with the sows. Gardens, we'll turn the pigs into the gardens. This is like a big nursery. We've gone away from that. And here's the barley in the springtime, spring oats. I broadcasted, frost-seeded some spring oats this spring, and they'll make use of that. They'll harvest it all down. We've used high carbohydrate pumpkins, sunflowers, squash and corn, and just turn them in there. Okay, and this was the problem. You can just see all the weeds we brought in. So we've gone to sorghum Sudan grass for the last 3 or 4 years, and you can see them rotating through there. Okay, and this is what happened. I planted some beets, I think, and the deer just ate it all down, and it just was pigweed. I've tried the daikon radishes. Have anybody ever tried these? I was hoping, I went out there and tried them before the pigs, and whoo, they're hot. And I was wondering why they wouldn't eat them. It was like horseradish.
We tried it in cattle, and it worked real good.
They ate them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had these in the winter or in the fall, and after the frost, they ate the tops. But you'd see them just rooting up the radishes, and they wouldn't eat them. Okay, so here's moving down the holler. When one's done, we'll move them into the next one. You can see how well they consume that Sudan grass. And this is, probably in June, July. We have a feeder in there. Then we self-feed them, as well as turning them into the millet. This is following our soil samples, and briefly, real high in phosphorus, real high in potassium, real high in organic matter, but we don't spread any manure from the waste management shed anymore on there. We sell it. Okay, so here we're getting into the fall, getting ready to put them in the woods. How am I doing?
About 5 minutes more to speak, and then I think we should leave 5 minutes for questions.
Okay. All right, so here's, they're getting ready to go up into the woods. We used to have this as a type of watering system. You got to make sure you put a hog panel over this so they don't go in there and just lie down on this. This works, but we've gotten a new watering system in there now. You can get, I love the looks of this pig. It almost looks like the Iberian hog. And this is what's going to really pick up that flavor. Okay, I've used, and I still have, a good friend of mine shot a sow, Eurasian wild boar sow, and she had 6 pigs on her, and he called me, he says, you want any of these? I said, yeah, I'd like 2 males. And so this is what we have, and this, the whole point of using this as an F1 cross with the domestics is that, again, the feast or famine gene, they're going to put on that fat. You know, and that's you don't want to send those pigs up into the woods without a good fat. But on the same token, you know, you got to be careful. You know, I mean, you don't need to have them exploring all over the place. And there's a real issue with feral pigs, obviously, in Texas and everywhere else. So whatever you do, you have to be careful. You have to know when that fence is down before they know when it's down. And you need to feed them. Why are they going to go over that ridge? If you know, there's no reason to. They will with mast, and I'll call them, you know, every time it'll be a whoo, you know, and then that'll go up the holler. And if they don't come down in about 20 minutes, that means they found some good mast. And then typically, once you find where they are, you know, we'll still put a bead of feed down there just to say, you know, it's Chuck, he's coming, something's good's going to happen. But those pigs are very interesting, and they'll just keep walking by and go eat the mast. I mean, maybe they're being polite. I don't know. Oh, and we did surveys in terms of looking at the impact of the soil in the woods and what's going on. The pigs are very good at controlling stilt grass, which is a real invasive species in the woods. And there they are. We did a crop tree release. Towards November, when the mast diminishes or they've found it all, they'll become more needy. So when you do holler, you know, figure 20 minutes, and they're sitting up on the top of the ridge where the sun first comes up. They always are, and they'll come down from there, and they'll, okay, where's the food? We've got a hydraulic trailer, which is nice. We put it out in the middle of the pasture, put feed them for 2 or 3 days. 3rd day, just close it. You know, I mean, the first day, if you're saying, oh God, we got to get that pig, well, that's a little trickier. But you know, it's like, oh here's Chuck again with that trailer. Okay, this is interesting. You can see the F1 gene, the feral gene here. When I used to go up and feed, my dog would follow me up into the woods, and you know, I'd put the bead down, and these F1 crosses wouldn't even eat. They just, come here, puppy, you know. And you tell me that's not a behavioral change, you know, for a pig not to eat. And they just would watch until he left. We did a study with crop trees. We removed, if this was the tree we were trying to encourage, we would remove this tree, and that would open up the canopy so that you'd end up with, this was a SARE grant that I got, the crop tree release program. That's our farm. And this is bringing down I have an Amish community that I work with, and here you can see where it's trying to open up the canopy. That was the inventory. This is the coastal forest region, and white oak and hickory are predominant. This was part of the crop tree release program. We counted acorns. Here's the stilt grass, and this was 2 weeks later. You know, they just consumed that stilt grass. And that's that picture from the Whiskey Magazine. Here we had a chef's soiree, and we've been at James Beard. We had a 12-course dinner with pork, if you can figure that out, up in New York. We were asked to go up there. I was in Forrest Pritchard's book, chapter 9, I think it was, and this was a book signing, Growing Tomorrow with Small-Scale Producers. and I was in our forest-fed hogs. Niche market production was in this, and if you want, I'd be glad to send you a digital of that article. But I think that's it, and this will all be online.